Well, hello there, Apple Bites. This is your Apple Bite, Rafael Tavares, talking to you straight from the written writ. It's been a while since I get to say that. And tonight we are going to get a bunch of players together who have played Vampire the Masquerade and, gotten to the nitty gritty of things and figured out how good the game is and how it can help you be creative. Let's see. The first person I guess I want to put up there. Let's see what we got over here. Everybody's here. But Leandro, let's start off with you. Since I guess we'll go in chronological order because I met you first. We started playing in like the early 90s, and when I first got there, you were the one storytelling Vampire the Masquerade. I know you were telling me that you had just started like a couple of months before that. How did this whole vampire thing start out for the group?
Well, it really started off the heels of Anne Rice's Vampire, the interview with the vampire. You know, um, it was like early to '90s. The movie had just came out. I distinctively remember seeing it in our mutual friend Harry's house. And just the imagery, the pageantry, the storytelling was just inspirational. And then from there, Harry said, there's a game that's pretty similar to this, and it's really, really crazy. It's you just and so he showed me Vampire the Masquerade. I don't remember exactly what edition it was. I think it was second edition, but I read through it and I was just thrilled how it borrowed a lot from biblical mythology, origin vampire. It's, I wanted to play it, and it was
Right.
and that's exactly what we did, and it was a great experience.
And Myra, I know we were talking about it behind the scenes, and I know who you are, and known you for a while. And when my whole online Omega City and the whole Vampire and this great thing started forming, you were the one that was there with me. But tell everybody how you got involved in everything.
Well, I start out. I like to write, so I had put a on. Oh, gee, it's been so long. Um, on Yahoo, I had written up a little blurb about me liking to write and everything. So then one of your players from Omega City contacted me and asked me to join your group. So I figured, okay, and she said you can create a vampire or something, and so I said, oh, okay, I'll go and try it. Well, at that time, I knew nothing about Vampire the Masquerade. So I ended up creating a freeform character that did not really fit the game itself, but
Right.
it fit into your Omega City. And so that's kind of how I got started. Then as time went on, I was invited into other groups to play, and then they decided that they didn't like Star, so they wanted me to create a vampire character. And I kind of dragged my feet on it a little bit, kind of, was very stubborn,
I
but
remember.
they just got me into it. And that's, then I ended up picking up the book and learned the rules and really, went from there.
Yeah, I know you became a great help for me after because you surpassed me in rules and everything. I remember that much. Giovanni, I know we were just talking about it, but let everybody know, how does it you started into the whole vampire universe?
Well, it began with me. Vampire Masquerade in particular was a show Kindred. It was a television show,
Great
loosely
show, yeah.
based on. Yeah, it was loosely based, but what attracted me with that show was the fact that they had vampire clans, and I enjoyed that. And there was always this internal conflict and external conflict, and this world above the world. And later on in life, I met up with a friend that we had a conversation during a job, and he mentioned to me that it was a system, World of Darkness system, particularly Vampire the Masquerade. And when I read the books, it was the lore that got me. The amazing amount of detail, the fact that the traditional vampire tropes and classes all had like families and different types of things, but it was just so attractive because it maintained that conflict and that essence along with the romance and kind of like plainly put it, the sexiness of the vampire, the allurement, the ugliness, the conflict. It was just something to me that attracted me, especially with that lore. I love lore, man. That's my thing.
I gotta admit, one of the biggest things that attracted me to Vampire the Masquerade was the lore. I love the way the universe was set up. I like this whole Gehenna thing happening in the background. I like the fact that, as the generations were getting higher and higher, it was causing issues, and the lines were being it was getting to the point where you weren't even a vampire pretty much anymore. It wasn't even in your blood. It was just a lot of stuff, and it was all heading towards this big like end of times type of thing. Just wondering here. Okay, Leandro, when you started, how did you attack the whole thing? Because I know how I had to go through it with it, but what made you decide to play the game that you were playing?
Well, basically, how I tackled it was just the way in which I just read the book. It was just as simple as that. It was, it really the second edition really, emphasized storytelling above all else. You know, so if the he I remember the books describing the rules being as more like guidelines, or like signposts towards for ways in which you can guide the story, but it shouldn't take place of the story itself, which is what you and all the players are doing together. So basically, how I tackled it was I wrote like a general plot, right? And then I plugged in like, the characters, or the players, who I at that time, already had their characters, made up. And so I would have you. I don't know if you remember, but I used to have like these private like sessions or like talks about the characters and what they want or what they're afraid of,
I remember that. Yeah.
and things like that. So I would use that information, and then I would plug it in certain specific plots to move the story, certain specific points in the plot to move the story along. So that's how I tackled it.
It's funny that you're saying that now, because I wondered where I got it from. So I must have got it from you when I was doing the big game, the big online game when I took over Omega City. Oh, when I created Omega City, what I was doing was, as each person came in, because the whole concept of Omega City was this city out of time. All the supernaturals are trying to live together in this one city, and they all know about each other, and the humans know about everybody else too. So what I started to do was that the city itself would call you in. You didn't know how it called you in. Sometimes it was by supposedly accident. Sometimes it was because you were looking for it. And one of the best things that I love to do was like bring people into the city, because it was always such a creative process of, how did you get in? Did you crash through? Did you come in a car? Did you fall out of the sky? It was always something new to create for the person to come in. And I remember what would happen was that I would sit there with each individual, and we would be personal messaging each other, and they would create their character. They would tell me who their character is. They'll tell me what they wanted, where these characters were from, what the big story was. And I found that the more they would create their characters, and of course we all know this, the more the person creates the character, the easier it is for the storyteller to actually write their campaign.
Yes.
Because it gives you so much to draw from. And that's what I was doing. As people came in, I would take them, I'll sit them down and go, give me as much information about your character as possible, and then I will work that into Omega City. And it sounds funny because you figure because there's no connection in the city if you're coming from somewhere else, but that stuff actually helps.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. Because I mean, you never know what part, what a unique piece of of a character's backstory can be analogous to what they might encounter in Omega City. You know what I mean? Like they may encounter like someone similar that they have met in the past who had an
Hmm.
effect. So it could be anything. That's the beauty of of vampires, that you can create your own cities, your own worlds, in which it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific place. It could be a mythological place like Omega City itself, or it could be something loosely based on places that you've been before. So it's very diverse.
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons I like the game so much, and I feel like I say it all the time in the Writ and Rich show. I feel like Vampire has helped my writing immensely because especially Myra, because we were doing the Omega City and we had to take so many people into you know bring them into the story so they all felt like they were a part of the story. I know that you started helping me out after a while. How did you feel about that whole experience when you had to bring somebody into the city or you had to figure out how to write a specific story for a certain person?
Oh, I loved it. Um, there was a lot of creative process going on with that. I would have them send me an email with their complete background story on their character to tell me as much about the character as possible, where they came from, what they, what their personality was and things like that. And then I would have to find a way to bring them into Omega, which was really fun because each person that came into Omega came in differently. Somebody might be driving through the desert and all of a sudden almost run into a building because Omega would suddenly show up right there and out of nowhere. Somebody else was maybe flying and ended up crashing into a lake. So each character brought into the city came in a different way. And that's what made it so creative and so unique as an overall story. And that's also what made it enjoyable to me.
I agree. I completely agree. Again, I call it the early version of what I do on the show, which is the challenge, where I'm challenged. Oh, this is what you have. What are you going to do with it? And I live for that stuff, and I feel like it is all because of the whole time I spent on Omega City, because it kept you on your feet. You had to keep thinking. You had to think quickly, especially because you wanted to get these people into the game and playing as soon as possible. Giovanni, I know. Did you ever get to play the game itself, or?
I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, yeah. I kind of muted my mic so when I give backdraft. Sorry.
Oh, no
Actually,
problem.
to tell you the truth, no. The people that, yeah, it's a travesty because it was like I learned about it later on, what the stuff was based on, but the people that I associated with, they were more into D&D. VTM was more new wave. It was seen as a new era type of thing, kind of like new metal. But it wasn't. I really couldn't find players, and at the time, I hadn't connected to the web yet. 56K, but I never got into the chat groups and stuff like that. I wish, because now that I'm hearing the lore was so immense, and now that I hear how you guys talk about it, it's like, wow, man, it's amazing how deep you can get. And the doorkeeper role, which is the welcome. Like, what are you doing here? How did you get here? That is so important to storytelling, because then you can flesh out a character and, it becomes, now you have your own personal guy that you're invested in. As you spoke out before, the newer models kind of eliminated that investment where you're no longer tied to the character. So you're not apprehensive about throwing your character into danger. You can put him into danger, get them killed, and you don't care. But when you're invested into the character, you kind of make wiser decisions. You kind of do things behind the side. It becomes kind of like an alter ego, and I think that's so important.
Like, it completely is. I feel like when you're more invested in your characters, it means more. You know, I've never understood that whole concept of, okay, we'll just create another character. I'm like, no, I just spent all this time with this character. How am I going to just create another character? You know, and it's one of the things that happens in D&D, because sometimes you die. You know, and it is a lot of investment, but I feel like in D&D, usually you die because you're being stupid.
Mm.
You guys agree or disagree?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
The DM can be merciful at times.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a simple statement as is, are you sure you want to do that?
I
I
can't
agree.
comment.
We heard that many times. What happened, Myra?
Yeah, I can't comment on D&D because I never played it, but I saw many cases playing werewolf in New Bremen on the White Wolf website. I saw many times when people did some pretty stupid things that got their characters killed.
I think what bugged me out the most, especially when a character dies, you know, like, I'm not gonna say there's no evil DMs out there or storytellers, but I feel like there's times where a character dies, and then the player goes, "Why did you kill my character?" I'm like, "No, you killed your own character. You did nothing. And that was just stupid."
Either that or the roll of the dice killed them.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's always a possibility.
Yeah.
That 1 and that 20 is always vicious, and I know
Oh my
because
God.
I tend to roll ones.
Mhm.
Or the lucky number 3 and your initiative is low.
I know we're all creative here. I know Leandro is working on a comic book. I know Myra, you yourself are working on a book or two yourself. I'm working to write. Gio, are you doing anything?
Currently, I know I've had several ideas which I kind of have in my unfinished bin, but I haven't committed to anything fully. I kind of feel that call that I should, and that's the call of the writer, I guess. But right now, I don't have any projects that I'm on.
Well, it's perfect, because what I was going to say was we're all writers here. So, you know, I feel like one of the reasons why the Vampire the Masquerade calls is because, again, the rich history, the richness of it helps you or makes you want to add to it. You know, because you're as a writer, you're like, what's the story here? Do you guys agree or disagree? Leandro?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yes.
100%.
Myra?
Yeah, I agree. One reason, like I said, I never played D&D, but when I was playing with other players who did play it, just from hearing them talking about it, it seemed like that game was more goal oriented. You know, where you're going on quests and there's a lot of battles and things like that. Whereas with the World of Darkness scenario, not just with Vampire, but with the other ones as well, it was all more story-based, and I really enjoyed playing it online because it was all writing. You know, it was not going to like a video game where you're playing out stuff with cartoon characters and stuff like that. This was where you're actually engaging in the writing process, and you're basically creating what amounts to a novel or a series of novels with other people. Yeah, that's the way I looked at it, because each person has their own character that they're playing, and you're all interacting. So it's like collaborating on a novel, even though it doesn't get published as such, but it's still going through the same type of process.
I completely agree. I also feel like, like just like with Vampire, if you have the right dungeon master, or if you have a certain type of dungeon master, you'll get a more role-playing type of game. But again, it all depends on which dungeon master you have when it comes to that, because D&D is a little bit more about the numbers, the statistics, the battles, the goals. I'm not gonna say there's not too story driven, but if you have the right DM, then you'll have a good role playing type campaign. Gio.
Yes.
So, we're talking about the whole writing and vampire. I feel like the whole thing is that it's so rich that it makes you want to write more.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Simply, for example, simply chronicling the dynamics between the different families and how everyone might have a main motive and the ulterior motive, and then you have individual goals, and then you have stuff based on race and interaction, and there you break the masquerade, and then you have people hunting you, and
Mhm.
it's just amazing. Yeah, it definitely pushes you to write. You have no choice.
Yeah, and which is funny because that's what I've been telling everybody on the written riff for ages, and I feel like that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this live event, especially on Halloween. It's because it just the vampire hasn't. I'm not gonna say that D&D or the rest of the stuff hasn't inspired me, but I feel like the richness of the lore of Vampire the Masquerade has made me want to do my own stuff that is just as rich, that's just as thought out. I believe, especially in Joseph Campbell's The Journey of the Hero, and I feel like every hero has their journey. Whether they're a hero at the end of the journey or a villain, that's up to them. But I feel like every hero has that journey that they're going to go through in order to become who they are. And I feel like with Vampire, which is funny because it's more about personal choices, being more of a monster, what you do as you're becoming a monster. But I feel like that's the kind of stuff that in life we got to go through, and which makes us who we are, which makes for good character. Yandra?
Yes, no, absolutely. Because with Vampire the Masquerade, it's all about the descent. It's, you when you're converted or when you're embraced, it's cool in the beginning because it's a new experience. But then as time goes on, you start realizing that you're becoming something that's inhuman, something that can no longer fit in society in the way it would before. You know what I mean? And so writing about that, the nihilism, the the, the, the corruption, of, it's something. I don't know. It's beyond words. Actually, I can't really describe it clearly, but it's definitely something touching.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like it is such a depth of thing, especially it's that emotion of what are you going to do.
Yeah.
Myra?
Yeah, I really enjoy it because of the conflict. You've got the internal conflict as well as the external conflict. Like you, all of a sudden, you're thrown into this world that you may or may not have known even existed. Becoming a vampire, and depending on which clan you end up in, you take on certain traits from that particular clan. Like, for instance, my favorite clan was the Gangrel. With that clan, each time that the vampire would frenzy, have like a blood frenzy, each time they did that, then they would develop an animal trait. They might start growing some feathers someplace, or might grow a tail, or a patch of hair, fur, or a bird's beak. And each time it would be different. It would be some different animal, and it was kind of unpredictable, which made it kind of fun to play that type of character. Because once they start developing these physical animal traits, then they can no longer participate in human society, for one. They have to hide, basically. And it makes things challenging.
I agree. One of the reasons I loved Gangrel so much was because of that. If you know, I wish like in life, I don't know if it would be good or not, but can you imagine if your emotions will start to be wearing them on the outside? You know, every time you got angry, you have a new animal trait or something. You know, after a while, people be like, I'm staying away from that one. That one can't control his emotions.
Yeah.
Gio.
Yeah.
So you know what we're just saying. You know, the whole writing of you know, the whole using vampires writing because of the depth of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just listening to the descriptions and that conflict, I mean, that's what made me attracted to the lore is just that conflict, the hidden thing. Like, you know, imagine like you get turned and now you wake up and you have all these new abilities, but there's a preset of rules that you don't know about. Rules that if you break, it costs your life. And then what if you have to break a rule to fulfill some purpose of your own, you know? And just that this, it's like, you know, it's like becoming an adult, you know? You walk into something at 18 and it's like, well, you know, like for males, you have to file a draft card, you know? And now you're born into these rules and it's like, you don't even know what's going on, but now you have these responsibilities. And I think that's what makes it attractive as opposed to, you know, I'm going to create a level 1 mage and we're going to go out and I'm just going to be a cleric, you know? It's like that internal, external conflict. And then there's the conflict with other players. Other players don't like you because you are who you are. Or maybe they do like you, but they can't associate with you because family boundaries. So it's just definitely an attractive system. It's just the World of Darkness period, the way it was built is amazing. It's contemporary, I feel.
I completely agree. I feel like you know, the classes added to it, especially like if you wanted to really play something, you play the game as a caitiff, which would bring a lot of stuff with it, you know, because as a you know, you would go through the societal because you as a caitiff were looked at as the lowest part of society. You had no clan. And I felt like if you wanted to like challenge yourself, playing as a caitiff was the way to go, because you know everybody else is like, well, I am Toreador, and I am this, and I am that, and you're sitting here going, I don't even know who the hell bit me.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you want to play a game where you're lost completely from the beginning, that's the way to go.
And then everybody's against you because they don't like you because they don't know what, you know, what clan you're supposed to belong to. So you're like the you know, you're like the outcast.
Yeah, the outcast. That is cute. Gio, you said something?
No, I said I like that. It's just, you see, even the way it's described, it's like, it's amazing. It's just, it's a beautiful, like I said, I mean, I read a lot of lore and I read a lot of different books with the World of Darkness. I kind of had a partiality Promethean because just the idea of like creating a non-living entity and giving it life, and now it has its own quest to fulfill, but it interacts with different elements of other World of Darkness characters. I was like, wow, it's amazing. Because with the Prometheans, if they stay in one place too long, the area begins to be affected by disquiet. And if you remember the old Frankenstein cartoons, or the movies rather, you know how everyone kind of hated him regardless because he was hideous?
Right.
That aspect is called the disquiet. And any place where a Promethean stays too long begins to suffer the disquiet. And they get attacked by various entities and creatures. And I'm like, you know, imagine if a vampire decides to create a muse for itself and it makes a Promethean as beautiful, but then decides to abandon it because it's bored with it. And now that Promethean has its own quest to create life because it wants to get that spark of life. And now it can't remain in that home because it begins to suffer disquiet. So I liked it because even the Prometheans always interacted with other elements of the World of Darkness.
I gotta admit, the first time I'm hearing this is from you, you know, and I did jump into a lot of the lore of the World of Darkness, but that just sounds beautiful, you know, and right just from listening to you, I have like 10,000 story ideas. Oh, that's just amazing! I can see why you like this so much, and you know, that would have been interesting to see if something like that would have ended up in Omega City. You know, Myra?
Well, this is the first time I've heard of the Prometheans, to be honest. There were a lot of books that I did not get into and read. Like, a lot of the poems I had no interest in, so I didn't go into reading about their lore. But yeah, if something like that came into Omega City, it could kind of shake things up a little bit.
I can just imagine, man, especially if you can't leave the city.
Oh yeah.
With that disquiet, because there was one particular story I remember reading, and I don't mean to butt in, but there was a story I remember reading where somebody wrote a Promethean story, and in the city there were all of in the town they were in, they began to have all of these race riots, and people couldn't understand what was going on, and what it was that there was a Promethean on the ground constructing another Promethean, and he was there for so long that the disquiet had disrupted everything around in the city.
Wow.
So all these political things are happening. Everyone thinks it's because of civil rights movement, and it's not. It's because the disquiet is affecting everyone in the area, and they're just getting violent.
I don't know, man. I'm sitting here listening to this, and I you know how I always tell you, Mara, I always have Omega City ideas. They're always there. I guess because I worked on it for so long. And it's such a big part of me that even now, you'll post something up, and I'll be like, there's the beginning of an Omega City story.
Well, considering that in Omega City, the whole idea behind it was for everyone to try to get along together, and then have something like this show up in Omega City. That could really mess things up big time. I mean, it could really create some major conflicts.
And we already had major conflicts. Like you could just imagine. I'm guessing you Omega people should be happy that I didn't know about this, because if I did, I would cause so much trouble.
But this concept about the Promethean is pretty fascinating. I gotta admit, because I mean, think about it. Think about the perspective of the Promethean, like the way you described. There was a Promethean in that area trying to, create another one. What if that Promethean is indifferent to the chaos that that's happening around him, and he just decides, oh well, as long as I get what I want, the city could burn for all I care. Like imagine having to deal with the Promethean with that attitude, or temperament.
Which book was the Promethean discussed? Talked about?
Yeah, it was an individual. It was literally its own. It was its own book. It's called it's called Promethean the Created, and the foundation book, which is the main book, it describes the different types of Prometheans. You have your Frankenstein monster type. Then you have the muse that is carved with archaic emblems. Then you even have robotics, which are included. I remember one story I read where they created Promethean, which was an AI, and once the Promethean is created, it has an ultimate goal where it has to transfer. It has to create something called the spark, and the spark is basically the ignition of the soul. But the only way it can do it is by creating another Promethean and sending it on his journey. So imagine that I create you, I give you life, I become a soul-bearing human, and I just send you, and you're off on your way, kind of like the Frankenstein curse. And the Prometheans, they're forced to keep moving. If they remain in a place too long, they receive something called the disquiet, and that begins to attract dark spiritual beings. Let's say you have a mad scientist in the area splicing animals together, like Herbert West. Well, those creatures become attracted to the Promethean disquiet, and they start to show up over there. You might find hunters that might show up because they're attracted to going there for something that's going on. People begin to experience violence, and the land begins to spoil. There begins this type of rotting in the land, and a lot of times people don't understand that it's a Promethean in the area.
So is that part of the vampire world, or is it part of the mummy, or part of the maid?
Literally, it's set in the entire World of Darkness world. They seem to have a lot of interactions. They can't have interactions with vampire because some Prometheans are hundreds of years old, so they may come across different types of vampires. Even werewolves based on the spirit totems, because some of the Promethean classes do inherit visions. where they can see dark spirits. But as I said, you have all these type of interactions. But I mainly see those type of what I read was mainly with those. But they kind of go on this quest where they're just collecting, trying to create another Promethean by any means. And the muses are particular because the muses are created by, let's say, Leonardo da Vinci's David comes to life. Now that's a Promethean, and he uses that to inspire him to create works. Now let's say he dies. That Promethean is still alive. And now it goes on this internal quest where it's driven to create another Promethean. But imagine now this is happening in 2006. So you're talking several hundred years of this thing roaming around in different countries, trying to find out what its purpose, two, what does it have to do, and three, how can I get to do it?
Wow.
So during that time period, they're going to run into, vampires, of course, because they're going to kind of be attracted to that oddity of something. There's something different about you because you have some Prometheans that look like humans. They look like perfect humans, just that they're not perfect. They have the disquiet.
I gotta admit, you sold me on this. I'm gonna be looking this book up. You know, which edition is this part of?
Well, I have I have the most current one on PDF, and it still functions. They've expanded the lore, and that's kind of why I read it through, because it had the same allure to me as Vampire the Masquerade. I have it on PDF. I could probably send it to you. I have it on PDF.
Okay, cool.
I could send it to you, but it has that. I liked it because it had that rich lore base that attracted me to Vampire the Masquerade. It just has that rich idea and the fact
really
that
rich.
you can do much with it.
I can see so much, like I said, I can just see so much potential here. And it has such heart to it because, it's the whole concept of what man is always trying to do, which is trying to find why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Correct. But yeah,
I know I'm interested. You're saying, Gio?
No, I'll send it to you. I'll have it sent to you. I don't want to take up all the time.
No. It's very interesting, and it's the heart of the show. We're all here because we're creative, we're writing, and this kind of stuff is what gets us writing because it helps us. It sparks creativity. There you go. Oh, that I have to admit though. Now I got all these like story ideas in my head. I got some new Omega city ideas.
Yeah, later on, send me your email address and I'll send you the PDF, or I'll Dropbox it to you. You'll like it. It's big, but it still has that rich lore base and is very attractive.
So I know that Gio, that you were thinking about like heading in the direction of writing. I know you've been writing for a while yourself.
Yes.
And I know we're all in the same boat. I think Leandro is the closest to actually publishing something right now. Right, Leandro?
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you guys are up to, but but yeah, I do have a graphic novel in the works. But yeah, I mean, it is based on is definitely like influenced on my experience of Vampire. But very heavily influenced.
So it's like we're all the creative type. We're all writing. I know that you want to write something, right, Gio?
Yeah. Yes.
So what do you think is holding you back? Because I feel like that's an interesting question to ask. Gio? Do we lose Gio on? Oh, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, it's right. It's like when you're about to accept that job, and they're like, "What do you think?" And you're like, "Yeah, and then it cuts off.
All right, so you want to write? What do you think is stopping you?
Really, I was it was funny. It's not so much time, it's just inspiration. When we were doing the weekly shows, when we were creating our own story and doing that, the juices flowed, man. Had that creative spark, and I started writing again. And then, of course, with everything, COVID hit, and then it was like, yeah, it kind of speed bumped me. Mm-hmm. And, I just, when I talk to other writers and I hear things, because what it is for me is passion. When I hear passion projects, like I hear you or Myra or Lissandra talk about like BTM and how it experiences, you know, like you could feel it. And that energy I love that energy, you know, because it inspires me. And I think a lot of it is inspiration, man. I know as writers, you have to draw your own inspirations, but there's nothing like sitting down with other people and just listening. And then you're like, you know something, what about this? Or what about that? Or you know what kind of conflict, you know? Or yeah, you know what? I like this fight. I like this battle. I like this idea of a guy waking up and he's a human being, but he sees a tattoo and he wants to know the tattoo and he finds out that he was a Promethean, you know, like that. Like, wow, you know, like it's just inspiration, I think is more my issue.
Well, personally, I'll say for myself that you guys can say for yourself. I can understand that completely because there's times where you kind of lose it, and I do know that talking to other writers, talking to other creatives, is a good way to go because, like you said, I think it's the passion that we see in each other, wanting to complete our goal. Myra?
I agree. I know I've been unable to write for quite a while. I had written a novel and it got turned down when I tried to publish it. And then my mother got sick and then she died, and I just haven't gone back to it since then. And then I got into the role playing world, and that kind of helped me cope with her death. To be honest, that helped me keep going and helped me cope with everything. And then from there, then I ended up working, and my hours became long, and I just haven't been able to get myself back into it. I think a lot of it is, you know, like you said, inspiration. Other parts, but just plain old writer's block.
We know that. That one, yeah. I feel all you guys, and you know, if we're looking for a small creative group, we're here. I know the connection here is me right now because I've known you for different things. I know you for one thing, I know Leandro for one thing, I know Myra for another thing. And you know, but we're here for each other if we actually need to have that creative process of writing.
Oh, that sounds great.
Sounds wonderful.
Amen.
Yeah, I think I did my best writing when I was participating in some writers groups.
That stuff helps, you know. And I know as a writer, sometimes what it is that we're sitting there going, "They're gonna steal my idea," but it's so funny because it does help so much. I know for a long time I didn't want to share anything that I was writing, and then my partner at the Bit and Apple was like, "But you know, it's good that you share it. You need that feedback." And she got me more into sharing things, and now I have my own writing show where we talk about the journey to become better writers.
Yeah.
And I know what you're talking about, Gio, because when we were working on the life story, which we're still working on, I just need to get to the next episode.
Of course.
It was this whole flow of ideas, especially because you guys were helping me write the story. You know, that became the whole creative process. Yeah, go ahead.
I was typing you paragraphs. I couldn't stop myself. Remember, I was sending you stuff at 10 o'clock. Like,
oh yeah,
dude, the show was over at 7, but because I couldn't shut it off. It's like once you get that flowing, it's like, man, it's like life, man. It's like life takes over, and it's like, yeah, what about this? What about that? What about this guy? What can we do with that? He can name this. What about that? It's like it just begins to churn that life, man. And that life, you could put it on paper a lot easier when you have other people that like that.
I completely agree. All right, so you know, it's been fun. I'll start wrapping this up a little bit. Leandro, I know, like I was saying before, I know that you're creating your book. Let the audience know a little bit about it. I know that you're not a Kickstarter stage yet, right?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I first want to have a finished product before I even attempt to do that. But basically, like I said before, well, I can definitely tell you what the title's going to be. The title's going to be called Tyrus's Court, and basically it has a double meaning. It alludes to not only the location of where the story takes place, but it also alludes to to the main antagonist and the relationship that he has with the character. So it's like Tierferson and his court, like his band. So basically, to make a long story short, the main characters the main character is a woman who's named Jessica, right? So she's telling her childhood to a psychiatrist in a mental institution. And so basically, she's retelling her childhood living in a haunted, 6-story tent, that's haunted by like a monstrous Nosferatu. So it's a really twisted, horror story that also delves into a lot of lore and mythology because it's the location where the story takes place is Brooklyn, and Brooklyn has a very high religious population. You know what I mean? So it's gonna go deep into the lore and to the local religion of the area.
All right, it sounds good. I know that I'm going to have you on when you're closer to the end of your project, so we can talk more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
And it's so funny. I was just thinking while you were talking that we all stayed in that supernatural lane. We may not be completely supernatural, but we seem to touch upon it as we write. Am I getting this right, or do you? I know, Myra, your stuff has a little touch of the supernatural, right?
Oh yes, definitely.
And Gio, you tend to lean towards the supernatural yourself, right?
Oh yeah, well I have a background. In the past I was a minister, so I kind of have that element to it, believing in life beyond what we see. And then of course, for my younger days, a horror movie fanatic. So with my brother, we used to watch horror movies. So there's always that thing of just that supernatural element of just different things that not like what you have, what then you have what's beyond it, a person's soul, person's attitude, energies, and things like that. So, yeah, definitely supernatural.
Yeah, and I find that most everything I write has some kind of supernatural bit in it. Even when I'm writing superheroes, there seems to be some kind of aspect of the supernatural in it, and it's just the way it is. Because I keep trying to figure out what exactly my style of writing is. If it's sci-fi, if it's fantasy, because I tend to jump into each lane and take what I want. I haven't been able to narrow down what exactly I am. I can tell you that much.
You're you. That's what you are.
Exactly. That's a perfect answer. All right, so to wrap this up, what do you want to leave the audience with pertaining to life, this topic, whatever it is you want to use as your closing paragraph or bit? I guess I'll start with Leandro. You good?
Yeah. If you're playing vampire, keep playing vampire. Keep rolling.
Leandro, I think we need to get you to speak up a little bit.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So
there we go.
To anybody who's listening, if you're currently in a campaign or if you're playing vampire, keep playing vampire. Don't as long as you can. I know we were just talking about this before. We got a lot about how life tends to disrupt. But if you're playing a campaign and you feel like I could do better things with my time, don't think like that. Vampire, the Masquerade, or role playing in general is extremely imaginative. It's extremely beneficial for developing empathy, developing storytelling techniques, and cooperative creation. So just keep on playing. You have no idea where it's going to take you.
It's a good bit of advice. I like that. Myra?
What are we doing now?
we're leaving the audience with a last bit of sage advice, word, whatever you want to say about our topic, or whatever you want to say, period.
Well, like they say, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. So just, keep at it, keep plugging at it. You don't become a concert pianist without practice. Well, writing is the same way. You have to practice and practice and practice to get good at the art so that you can finally get out there and get published.
Completely agree. Like I always say in my show, you got to write, and it's the only way to become a writer. And Gio, what's your last bit of sage advice?
Read. If you're playing a campaign system, and it's part of a larger world, try to find out other elements. Like the World of Darkness. You have Vampire the Masquerade, but that's just one book of like 15. Find out other types of characters that may be involved in that world, because that's a perfect streamline to pick up enemies. You can pick up enemies for your characters or allies, and they're not even in the current world, or rather the current book, but you might find them in another book. So just an example, imagine you're a newly bred vampire that your best friend is a wizard. And if you look at Geist the Awakening, or Mage the Awakening rather, that's a system in World of Darkness where they have mages. They're not like what you see on, it's not Gandalf, but it's still type of people that have to make pacts with different types of entities to get powers. And imagine if that's the person that's giving you advice. So read different books in your system.
I completely agree. It's like you brought this new aspect to the World of Darkness to us, and as it's funny because when I created Omega City, I took a lot of things that I have been learning over the years. It's a lot of bits and pieces. It wasn't just one thing that created Omega City. It was a lot of the stuff I had read over the years. And I completely agree where you're coming from here, and I feel like it's important, and it actually helps your writing style the more you're able to read, because you're able to pick up more information. You're able to try to figure out what your own style is as you read other people's style. So, with that, my friends, this is Written Writ Ralph signing off. I hope you liked our little impromptu Halloween special of Vampire the Masquerade and such. And if you liked it, let us know. Maybe we'll come back and have another Vampire the Masquerade discussion, because I like talking vampire. With that, this is Written Writ signing off. Until next time.
Next time.
Bye.